Good afternoon for those on site, and good morning, afternoon, evening for people joining remotely. I would like to start this session, and you have probably already seen all the page for the session, so you know probably everything, but I will repeat that the title of this session is When Universal Acceptance Meets Digital Inclusion. I will introduce the speakers as they come, and we will open this session with a message from UNESCO that will introduce the topic and tell us what UNESCO is doing in this area. This will be a video recording by Dr. Tafik Jelassi, sorry for bad pronunciation, and without further ado, I think that we can start with this presentation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, it's a pleasure to address you at this workshop on reaching the new billion users, indigenous communities, digital inclusion, multilingualism, and universal inclusion. The internet has long been recognized as an effective tool for development, a source of information, and a gateway for goods and services. It also provides a potential bridge to empower and amplify voices that have long been marginalized. An estimated 34% of the world's population, that is 2.7 billion people, have still never used the internet. Connecting an individual, locality, nation, or continent to the wealth of information, expertise, and communities distributed across the globe is among the greatest promises of the digital revolution. Today, there is a concern on how to reach the next 1 billion users, particularly the indigenous and unserved communities that have long struggled with limited access and representation in the digital realm. As we move forward, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that these communities are not left behind in the ongoing digital revolution. We must work towards a future where the benefits of the internet are accessible to all, regardless of their background, location, or language. UNESCO, as the co-lead of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages 2022-2032, together with the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, advocates for the preservation, promotion, and revitalization of indigenous languages worldwide. The Global Action Plan for the International Decade calls on favorable conditions for digital empowerment, freedom of expression, media development, access to information, and language technology. Under the able guidance of member states, UNESCO works tirelessly to raise awareness about the value and importance of indigenous languages, and works to develop tools, simplify processes, and enrich contents in cyberspace. Languages are the cornerstone of cultural identity and play a pivotal role in shaping societies. Enabling digital content and services in indigenous languages is essential so that speakers of these languages can express themselves, preserve their cultural heritage, and fully participate in the digital age. Moreover, we must prioritize efforts to make internet platforms and applications accessible to individuals with different linguistic abilities, ensuring universal inclusion and participation. The context of indigenous languages vis-à-vis universal inclusion is multifaceted. While the universal acceptance of indigenous languages is a crucial aspect, we must also focus on the development of other digital products and services tailored to the specific needs of indigenous communities. A limited definition of universal acceptance has contributed to a narrow comprehension of how to improve multilingualism online. It is incumbent upon us, therefore, to advocate for a broader concept, such as universal inclusion, that addresses the shortfall. One crucial barrier to achieving digital inclusion is the lack of multilingualism in cyberspace. To address this, the General Conference of UNESCO adopted in 2003 the recommendation concerning the promotion and use of multilingualism and universal access to cyberspace. This standard-setting instrument urges our member states to take appropriate legislative and other measures to promote the use of multilingualism in cyberspace, including promoting partnerships in the management of multilingual domain names. In our pursuit of digital inclusion and the empowerment of indigenous communities, promoting indigenous languages in the digital era is not just a choice, but is an imperative. Promoting indigenous languages in the digital era directly contributes to SDG 4, quality education. By providing digital resources, content, and tools in indigenous languages, we enable members of these communities to access education in their mother tongue. Indigenous languages also play a vital role in SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Language is the bedrock of communication and cultural expressions. By fostering the use of indigenous languages in the digital space, we promote inclusivity, respect, and mutual understanding. In closing, I urge you all to harness the immense potential of the Internet as a tool for positive change. Let us collaborate, innovate, and advocate for multilingualism and universal inclusion. Let us also identify solutions and implement initiatives, including raising awareness about the importance of preserving indigenous languages and the potential of digital technologies in reaching the new 1 billion users. I thank you for your attention and wish you fruitful discussions.
Thank you to Dr. Tawfiq Jelassi of UNESCO for this excellent introduction. Just for disclosure, my name is Roberto Gaetano. I'm a member of the user community in Europe, the internet user community in Europe, and interested in questions like multilingualism. I think that this excellent introduction, since is mentioning in indigenous languages and indigenous culture, I think that a nice follow-up of this will be the next contribution that is coming from Sara Kelemeni from a Finnish broadcasting company responsible for the Sami department, who is a Sami and can introduce some knowledge to us about the Sami population, that is an indigenous population here in Finland. Sara, you have the floor.
Dear Pukit, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts and experiences of digitalization with Sami languages, especially in Sami media here in Finland. My name is Sara Kelemeni, and I've been working for the past 10 years as a Gold Sami reporter or a journalist in a Finnish broadcasting company, precisely in Yle Sapmi. Our field of work is to provide the news and current affairs journalism for Sami-speaking people in 3 different Sami languages. We are producing articles and the news in all Sami languages which are spoken here in Finland. All of the Sami languages are endangered, and here in Finland we have 2 highly endangered Sami languages, Sami and Inari-Sami. So I hope I don't have to start to explain too much why our work in Yle is especially important to these languages for providing the media also in the smallest languages and the minority people whose existence has been threatened by the majority for centuries for now. I have had the front row seat to witness how well the media can be there supporting the revitalization. The importance of reading topics about your own culture and living environment can make a huge difference, for example, to the younger generation to use their own language. Here in the presentation, you can see the piece of the most recent Sami news from our front page. You can also see how the certain language is written and notice how they differ from each other. As a minority, there's always a giant pressure to use only the mainstream media in the main languages, such as nowadays in English or here in Finland in Finnish. Media can be there to support just by providing content in Sami languages. Such as indigenous media, the era of internet and digital media have ensured that nowadays anyone who has the access to use the electronic devices can also learn the Sami languages. In Finland, most of the education in all Sami languages are taught in digital learning environments from beginning of the school path and further education for the adults as well. All Sami languages were before only spoken languages for centuries. And for example, my family language, Sami, got its written form and its own alphabetical characteristics after 1960.
Sarah, sorry to interrupt you. You have to operate the slides yourself. So advanced, we are seeing still just the first slide.
Aha, okay, so it just didn't change for me. Okay, I hope
changed.
Now it changed. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, thank you for interruption. So now we can continue. And yeah, like you can see now, there is the most recent news from each languages. In the left, there is Inari-Sami. In the middle, some of Northern Sami, and then Sami, which are quite recent news from Yle Sapmi. But I can also tell you another couple of examples from our work environment in Yle Sapmi and also from the other service providers here in Finland. And the biggest and the most recent challenge in our journalistic work environment is the subtitles. This is an issue which haunts the Sami media and us journalists every year. You saw moments ago how Sami language looks when it's written, so I will use that as an example. We have not been able to use the modern subtitle programs in Sami at all because of its rare characters and alphabets. Then this universal texting program doesn't even recognize some of the alphabets in any Sami languages. This is a quite challenge because as a Sami language media, we want to serve the first-hand Sami-speaking audience and therefore also provide subtitles in case someone in the video doesn't speak any of the Sami language. We have tried multiple ways to make this work, but then here we are. Our TV news are broadcasted Monday till Friday at 4:45 in the evening. So there's a lot of viewers during that time. And the subtitles needs to be in Finnish as well. This is a screenshot of our news last week. Here you can see a gentleman, Hans Niittyvuopio. He spoke on this interview on his mother tongue in Northern Sami. But in our production and the news contents, we translate his speech also to Finnish for the subtitles. And in the same, now we go forward. And in the same news feature, this lady here is a Finnish-speaking person, so we needed to use Northern Sami in the subtitles. This is our everyday practice, so Sami-speaking person can see the news on their own language and also read about it in the subtitles as well. And the next one, here is a filmmaker, Katja Kaurilov, telling in a telephone interview about his Skoltsami movie, but she speaks in Finnish. So then we use a Skoltsami language in subtitles. Even the text would look normal now on the picture. It's not made in the same program as before because there are some characters that the current program doesn't understand at all. We are doing this for some time to ensure that Skoltsamis can also read their language via subtitles. To make news available for everyone, the subtitles play a big role. All of our videos are subtitles in our broadcasts. The actual subtitling is connected to a program which provides news to be heard for the people who are visually impaired. They can still hear the news via technology. But in the case of Sami language, we need to kind of burn the subtitles in the Skoltsami straight to the video to avoid the problems with functionalities within the characters. But this action we need to take makes the following video impossible for the people with special needs. The reading program cannot anymore read the subtitles. But just yesterday, I got great news that we have another new subtitling program which allows us to use any Sami letters in our streaming platform in Yle Arena as well. I'm looking forward to see how it starts to work and maybe in the future in TV as well. This subtitling issue causes some availability issues in our production for the people with special needs, but also if we would make it differently and write the subtitles only in Finnish, it would also create availability issues with minority languages. That's something that we are dealing with every day and single year because the technology development is quite fast. And as a minority language media, we need to try to run after it and stay right behind. And just an addition, right now we are not able to serve the Sami people who have this kind of special needs for easier access and hearing devices. Also because of this technological development, some of the TVs and digital routers, digital channels and digiboxes don't even recognize the characters of Sami languages. But I can say that in Yle we are not the only ones. I will now show you another example from our quite recent news topic about Finnish National Pension Institute, commonly known as Kela. As a national service provider, Kela also needs to serve Sami people by providing them forms, customer service and other services also in 3 Sami languages. Although they have faced a lot of problems with Sami characters as well, and couldn't be able to provide forms, for example, in any Sami languages, these kinds of difficulties made it impossible for the Samis to use Kela digital services in their own mother tongue, which Kela is obliged to provide. Sami people couldn't use their mother tongue applying the student support, unemployment benefits, or anything Kela is there to provide for. Sami people are used to that we always have to fight for our lingual rights in Finland and demand the services year after year. Recently, Kela was able to look deeper into this issue and is now providing the actual services and the forms in all 3 languages. Technological developments and the internet have made language revitalization easier for us, but we are still taking so tiny steps forward on a daily basis. We are not always heard among the majority, and the development in Sami services need also strong will from the actual service provider to cooperate with the Samis and serve them how it should be. As a Skolt Sami journalist, I still remember the days when I was still learning the language of my grandmother. First of all, the time period was in the beginning of 2010, and then there was any news or digital content in Skolt Sami language. Only place where I learned and I could read Skolt Sami was the old children's books and the material what my language teacher provided for herself. So imagine a situation. There you are, browsing the recently published iPad, which was totally a new thing in the early 2010. You scroll down the news on the web, and any of those aren't in your own language. As a journalism student, it felt incomprehensible. All these years back here, I have been there when we published the first news article in Skolt Sami. It was written and published on the internet. I have been learning how to download and install the Sami characters on my own smartphone. I have been anchoring the news in Skolt Sami, which you can nowadays watch and stream from the internet. There were so many things that even developed, changed, or renewed during these past 10 years that I've been working for Yle. I can assure you that there will be more and more examples to share, and I could talk about these topics like hours, but no one has this kind of time. If you have any kind of questions about our Sami speaking, Sami working environment or language revitalization, I'm happy to try to answer them. And I truly wish that all of you here who are working in some kind of field of technology and development, keep us, the minorities and the smallest groups of people on your mind when you are doing your own job. We need your support with the languages more than ever. Spasep, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for this very interesting presentation that gives us the opportunity also to think about how situation can get complicated for less used languages, and also can make us appreciate how the internet can be an important tool in order to rediscover and promote also the use of indigenous languages. I would be inclined to leave the questions to the end and to let all the other presenters to present. Also, the next two presentations will be addressing how the technology can help indigenous languages and in the supporting indigenous languages and indigenous culture. The next speaker is Steve Paulson, that has been part of the Peloton team for more than 25 years, developing multilingual programming tools for cyberspace. And he will speak to us about a new multilingual programming language and how it can enable universal acceptance. Steve, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And it's a great honor to be here. So in our view, after the 25 years of working with Dermot and our little Peloton team, we consider universal acceptance on the internet can only meet digital inclusion once universal basic comprehension of computing is achieved. And that requires a different approach to business as usual on the internet. So today I'll share three main ideas. Our view is the biggest issue facing universal acceptance and the digital inclusion around the world. What changes need to take place to the scope and definition of universal acceptance, and how a new approach to programming can provide a solution. So calling out the issue. For various reasons, historic, technological, economic, and political, the world of computing continues to use English as the default language. Currently, nearly 60% of the content on the internet is English, yet the world's English-speaking population is only about 20%. The lack of internationalized domain names is another example of the dominance of the English language. So deeper still, and arguably more impactful, English remains embedded in the foundation blocks of databases and programming languages. We know that we know that language impacts thought. If we are able to achieve universal acceptance and digital inclusion, multilingualism must be part of the fabric of cyberspace, not just something added on at the end. Similar to, if you want to make a fruitcake, you can't add fruit after baking. It must be part of the original mixture. So a way forward, to include people of all ages, all cultures, of all languages in cyberspace, with the opportunity for full participation, whilst maintaining cultural diversity at the same time, we require a new approach. A way that enables participants to engage in their own language, so they can inhabit that native paradigm and bring that to a shared digital world. Universal acceptance starts with input. It starts with devices. It starts with keyboards and screens. It starts with tools and programming languages to begin the possibility of development of multilingual systems, applications, and content on the internet. So a new programming language and system should enable multilingualism by providing a broad and rich operator set, accessible by using an intertranslatable vocabulary, rather than the current programming languages that start with the smallest possible set of operators and functions. Similar to Pascal beginning with about 16 tokens and C beginning with about 30. Should be 1,000 or 2,000 or more. So for true digital inclusion, we think we need a framework outside of language for people from any mother tongue to acquire the tools for systems and application development, content creation, delivery within cyberspace, which is encoded for their local language. It should provide an opportunity for each new version of that language to begin with the development of a vocabulary for each local language within the context of a multilingual, a full ontology of that language map. It should allow for native expression and thoughts whilst maintaining universal intertranslatability. This approach would automatically support the preservation of minority, indigenous, rare and endangered languages, their mother cultures, whilst fostering universal acceptance of the digital world. It should be noted that without the ability for intertranslation of multilingual systems, communities on the internet will remain separated and isolated, without the capacity for direct and shared communication. Universal acceptance should unite us all. So any new approach should be based on user empowerment as its main goal. We should expand the whole concept of universal acceptance to cover the entire spectrum of the internet ecosystem, including tools, processes, and content. The shift we need to make is to stop applying a simple translation overlay. If we started by scoping the meaning of each programming function and asked the user community to apply their native language to it, then each function of that system, of their entire system, we can then engage with that with any language, ensuring active survival of the most endangered languages and cultures within the world, our digital world. So I ask you all to consider this perspective. Where multilingualism thrives in the digital world due to the fact that universal acceptance has been achieved after basic universal comprehension of computing has provided the trust to all people, which allowed the world to move forward to include intertranslatability at every level within its very fabric. And that's what we've been working on for the last 25 years. So
thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for your interesting exposition of the problems. Next is Mark Durdin, SIL International Team Lead for the Keyman project, who will also explore other issues related to the technology that we need to master in order to have universal acceptance. Mark, you have the floor.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you for inviting me to join this conversation from Phnom Penh in Cambodia. I'm the team lead for the open source software keyboard program Keyman. I'd just like to say thank you to Steve for his perspective, and I recognize a lot of the things he's saying and would agree. Hi, Steve, I haven't seen you for a long time. So I work with the NGO SIL International. We partner with communities worldwide to develop language solutions to expand their possibilities for a better life. Much of our work is with digitally disadvantaged people groups. We work with over 1,300 mostly indigenous language groups around the world. So we estimate that over 25% of the world's people are left out of the global dialogue, and I recognize that Dr. Jalasi said that was 38%, I think. But whatever the number, it's a large number of people. They're left out of that global dialogue because of language-related barriers. And one of those barriers, of course, is the digital exclusion through lack of support for their indigenous languages. And that's both online on the internet and in general in technology. So from my perspective, universal acceptance is one important piece of the digital inclusion puzzle. So that is the ability to enter and display URLs, email addresses, and identifiers in the language which the user prefers. The internationalized domain names, or IDNs, are probably the most visible and well-known aspect of this effort. Thus far, universal acceptance has centered around the core requirement to be able to encode one of these IDNs in any modern Unicode-supported writing system, with a really strong focus on security, which is important. In particular, avoiding ambiguity, so targeting a visually unique encoding for any given identifier. And that's a good first step, but it's definitely not enough. So while a stable, reliable encoding is absolutely essential groundwork for the rest of the pieces in the puzzle to function, it does not get us to the point of actually being able to make use of universal acceptance as users. We need also to make sure that display of the domain names works properly. And crucially, users need to be able to type the domain names in a conformant manner. And currently these areas are outside the scope of universal acceptance. So this is not a big grand scale thing. This is just the next step in what we're looking at with universal acceptance. So some of the design goals around universal acceptance, in particular security, mean that the existing general purpose keyboard input methods that are in use around the world are not well suited to working with IDNs. it's very difficult to match the requirements of an IDN with the less rigorous encoding principles to which most of these keyboards have been built. So to bring this to home in real life, my team have been working recently on this with reference to Khmer, which is one of the trickiest languages in the world to type. Without intelligent input methods, it will be beyond the ability of most users to reliably enter IDNs in Khmer. Just last week, I observed this reality when a room full of computer science undergraduate and postgraduate students, so people who have years of experience in computing, they discovered that they had many different understandings of how to type and encode a variety of common Khmer words. So we recently released a draft paper on the Khmer encoding structure, which seeks to address ambiguity in the Khmer script Unicode specification. And now we are working on fonts and keyboards that resolve this issue for Khmer. But we're just one small team, and this is just scratching the surface of this problem for just one script out of so many in the world. So to conclude, universal acceptance as it stands does not address this need. So I agree very much with the discussion I've heard so far that we need to be refocusing our efforts. And I'd like to suggest that this is one small achievable step that we can take to getting to the point where indigenous communities and even majority language communities can actually make use of internationalized domain names day to day in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Your contribution brings to my mind a person that you might know, that is Norbert Klein, who did a lot of work for the encoding of the Khmer language. I'm sure you have in some way been talking to each other. So the next contribution comes from ICANN. We have here Martin Botterman, that most probably everybody know, ICANN board, former chair of the ICANN board, chair of the Public Interest Registry Board, and some other things that will take too much time to list. Martin, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Roberto, and thanks for the previous speakers for introducing the subject. As you know, ICANN is responsible in the world for the unique addressing system of the internet. So it's making sure that if you type in something, you get somewhere. And as previous speakers have explained, in tradition, this has been set up from the English language to the European expansion a little bit. But by far more to be done to make this inclusive for other languages. We're committed to other languages as we are committed to serving the world. And that already is seen by the fact that in our conferences that we do throughout the world, as also to allow to come people from that region specifically to our sessions, we support that by the 6 UN languages and where appropriate, the local language as well. So my main focus is not so much on the indigenous languages as how do we support different languages on the internet? How do we make that possible? In ICANN, we very much see that the next billion users, after the 5.5 billion users that are already using the internet, is very likely to be using one of those minority scripts or languages. So for that, please bear with me. I'll share a short presentation. Somebody starts Skyping me, which makes me... Eric. Yes. So universal acceptance is what for us is universal acceptance of different language scripts for the routing of along the internet and for reaching email addresses. Recognizing that minority languages and native languages, indigenous, are important because they reflect culture, they reflect personality, and it's great if we can keep that diversity in this world and support it. But also there's a lot of other languages that haven't been supported yet, which is to drive towards doing this. For work to be done to make things work, it's not only a matter of asking your service provider to do it, but it's also a matter of investment in making it possible. Now, you can see that for 1,300 million Mandarins, the investment proposition is different than for the Sami indigenous. So how can we support both? Well, basically, in the recognition that the new users are mainly coming from these new language areas, and already in 2000, about half of the world, more than half of the internet users came from the North American continent. Today, that's about 8%. And more than half comes from the Asian continent. That represents a lot of different scripts and languages as well. This is an impression of what is already there today, where you see that the different languages are reflected around the world. Again, Asia, a lot of big languages that are also there, but all across the world you find this. The internet consists basically, if you look to web addresses, of country TLDs and generic TLDs. For country TLDs, many countries already have their name scripted in their IDN at national level. This is an overview. These are the successfully evaluated IDNs. I'll tell more about resolving later. And there's already 91 generic TLDs delegated that are using different languages than the Arab script. So right now, if you look to these languages, how well do they resolve on the internet? It's clear there's work to be done. ICANN is supporting that. There is a global working group, which is called the Universal Acceptance Steering Group, that is open to membership, to which you can participate. I'll drop the URL in the chat for those who don't have it yet. Because currently, universal acceptance rates are varying. What you here see is different type of acceptance rates, but if you go to idn.idn, unicode.idn.idn, for instance, Chinese, but also many of the Indian languages, what you see is that is really like the character set times character set. The other ones are other issues in universal acceptance, like longer names than the traditional 2 letters or 3 letters. You see that currently that's about 8–9% of acceptance. More needs to be done to make sure that if you type in an address, you can count on it to get to that website. So the highest percentage currently is in India. There's even 11 or 12%. So they're well ahead of the curve. But it's clear that more needs to be done. This has been seen. This is not only done by ICANN and its community, but it also includes those who are making websites of the browsers and those who make email servers. Right now, what you see on email, it's much better. 22% is already resolving quite well. But also there, it's clear that the promise that IDNs bring, the ability for people to chat, to reach addresses, also in the address bar in their own language, is there. The promise is there, but the reality is that more needs to be done to make sure this works. So from the UASG, the Universal Acceptance Steering Group, the goal is to make it all work in all software applications. The thing is, if you connect to somewhere on the internet, you may go through different software applications. If anywhere in that software applications, there is not a recognition of the character set that you're using, you won't resolve. This is why it's so difficult. So we really believe it's important to promote consumer choice, improve competition, and provide broader access to end users. For the sake of time, and I'm willing to make this presentation available, but you can also go to the website UASG. It's important to recognize that it's different players that need to do this, because it's the community that needs to do this for the community. So it's for the community, by the community. And in that, governments have a role, in including, for instance, UA requirements in government procurement, which is one of those stimulus to get businesses to invest in that as well. And I can see in Finland, if we talk Sami, there's not a business case for commercial parties to really invest in making Sami possible, but there is a societal objective. So I can see that this might be funded by public funding and things like that. National CCTLDs will be able to play a good role in making also sure that it gets noticed and gets affected in ICANN circles, in the UASG circles, and that is an important way forward. So altogether, next to making this possible, the content is key. I'm very happy to hear from Sarah that the content is already there and is accessible and readable in that language. In other areas of the world, sometimes you see that the content is waiting for the resolving, so the ability to reach the addresses to work. But I think really to make this full, to make this work, the content needs to be king. That needs to be the convincing reason for also users to want to go there, which is the extra stimulus of the technical community to help make sure that it does work. So also for email systems, they need to be upgraded. There's also tests on the UASG site that you can use to say, does it work in my language or not? And yeah, talk with others if you're really passionate about this, as I know some people in this room are, because you need others to work with you, to be aware, to be open. Now, let me say that there is a roadmap for how to do it. There is all kinds of tools to help you do it. And basically, what the community has been working on for many years is creating what is called a root zone label generation rules. These are the basic fundamentals of how you would be able to encode your language, the language you want to see working on the internet, to work on the internet. And then what you need to create as a community, together with the technical community, is what's called the International Domain Name table. And there's already 27 there. And Mark, I've seen the one on Khmer is there as well. So this is not something that you can leave to the technical community alone. You really need to involve the language community. To accelerate this, what we've been doing is stimulating and supporting the emergence of a UA Day to raise awareness around the world. That has led to 45 events, including in Nepal, celebrating the fact that the feeling is, hey, we're getting closer to being able to do that. We see the momentum and we grow the momentum together. I was checking, I didn't see Khmer here, but many other languages are. So what you see is the momentum is there. These are the addresses to find more information on it. With those language generation tables, please reach out to the UASG and make sure that your language becomes represented in the IDN table list as well. Last but not least, ICANN is about to open a next round where you can submit requests for new top-level domains, and you may be able to submit that in your specific language if that language table has been established. So with that, I hope there's some provision. I realize that we talk about the importance of languages, to think in your languages, to work in your languages. En I haven't been speaking in Nederlands, helemaal niet in het Nederlands gesproken. Nor Roberto in Italian. So this is still the lingua franca. And that's not bad, but we can do better by making it work also for local languages, plus the extra benefit of that it does support the continuous existence and use of also minority languages that we care about.
Thank you.
Roberto.
Thank you, Martin, for this presentation of what ICANN has been doing. I may add that in the beginning, ICANN was making conferences only in English, and so it's already a big improvement to have interpretation, and you know, things go forward. I think that there's something that puts everything together here. So we have seen that there's a universal acceptance, and that is about giving the possibility to having domain names and email addresses written in different scripts. But that is not sufficient. We need to have keyboards to do this. We need to have also tools for translation, and so that will go forward. And then what was bringing all together was the first presentation from the Sami population on how they can possibly use all these tools, and that how this brings new life to languages that were about to be forgotten. We had other sessions in other conferences where we were pointing this out. So we need to have people on the field that push for the use of the local languages, and then at the same time technical advancement. Are there any questions for to any of the speakers right now? And then we need a few minutes also to check the messages that come out from this session. I don't want to eat too much into the break. So may I ask if there are contributions from the floor? Oh, yes, Nigel, I just checked 5 minutes ago and I didn't see you online, and I was thinking that you were unable to join. Sorry for not having noticed. Yeah, Nigel is the last speaker that had unfortunately to leave before the end of the conference, and he is connecting online. Nigel, you have the floor. May I ask you to be concise in your statement?
I don't see anything that's been said already.
Yeah.
I'll be incredibly concise because I just wanted to apologize. I had wanted to do a double act with my a good friend Martin, who is far more knowledgeable about what ICANN is doing, but I just wanted to mention two brief things. that I'm contributing to from the UK's perspective. One is to, as Martin has mentioned, to enhance the ability of people to apply for new top-level domains in different scripts and in different script variants as well. I'm engaged in a working group that's trying to ensure that different variants on different scripts, whether they're Chinese or Indian scripts or Cyrillic scripts, can be applied for generic top-level domains. So there's a lot of work going on there. And also that for the work that the governments are advising on in terms of greater diverse representation, especially from developing countries, underserved regions, in terms of new applications when the new application round launches in 2026. So really trying to do what we can to enhance diversity in the domain name space and multilingualism. So I'll finish there because it's been covered, and thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. I see a comment in the chat by Amali. Do you want to speak, or are you happy with the message in the chat? Okay, she says this is good. I have one more hand, is Rick, you have the floor.
Hello. Hello, you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Yes, okay, thank you, Roberto. No, just a few a few things, because we are in Belgium and active, mostly active with refugees and diaspora, and they speak about many languages that, you know, I've, and we have a problem with legal involvement, translating documents in a certain language, African language, or dialect, or including Arabic dialects, Marzaghi, because we are interpreting and translating documents for hospitals, for legal court, or even police, you know, when there are some difficulty or problems with refugees. So what we need, and we follow very closely your work, and we would like to accelerate, you know, the possibility to translate those documents, because sometimes it's not possible. The other thing is local content, and that has been mentioned, because we are very keen to promote local content from Africa or everywhere, Middle East and Asia, for our diaspora and refugees online. And that will be very useful to follow your work in the future. Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you. If I recognize the voice, tell me if I'm wrong. That was Richard Delmas.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So as there are no other questions, I would like to give the floor to the rapporteur to tell us what we can take away from this session.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to wrap up everything that's been said. You've said a lot of really interesting things, and I hope I didn't, you know, miss anything really relevant. But I will also try to follow what's been said, you know, by all participants. So we started with the UNESCO message, and in the UNESCO message, multilingualism was considered as a key issue for universal acceptance in the internet, well, as a means for digital inclusion, and generally speaking, also for the internet availability. Especially the problem is that actually there is the 34%, but that number was actually corrected by some other participants in the panel. There are 34% of the world population that has never used the internet. This poses also questions, because actually these people don't have access to, for example, only English or other languages that can be that are used to provide digital services. So to make them fully participate in the digital cyberspace, it is important to adapt and to adopt also multilingualism as a means for inclusion. This mission actually relates to both SDG 4, so quality education. So it provides, of course, digital resources, content and tools in indigenous languages, as well as access to services in their mother tongue. And this means also media relations, information, and all basic rights, but also to SDG 16, which is related to peace, justice, and strong institutions. Secondly, we focus on the case study of Sami population in Finland, which is really interesting because, of course, we have three different Sami languages. Of course, here again, we have the problem in providing news, especially related to the subtitles. For example, one of these Sami languages, that's called Sami, if I'm not wrong, is really hard to translate in a subtitle because they use really rare characters. And so it poses questions of the availability, not only of information, but actually also of other really important things like the welfare bureaucracy. Especially we focus on the case of the Finnish National Pensions Institute, Kela, and its problems in providing, documents to get everyone access to this kind of measures. Now I'll try to wrap up everything because in this, for the first couple of interventions, I was already prepared, and now it's going to be much harder. So actually, Steve Paulson focused on developed other things about the need to improve not just multilingualism, but also intertranslatability to all digital services. And he also said that actually the problem is not just about the contents provided, but also about, for example, programming, which is almost English-based, and other services, which were further developed by Mark, who focused, for example, on but Martin focused on, for example, the need for domains for example, mails, which is not just related to mails, but also, to digital identities. And so it is a really important issue. And Mark focused on the problem, for example, in South Asia and sub-Saharan regions that are almost not covered. And these numbers actually align with the fact that these are also the regions that have least access to the internet overall. Of course, the goal would be to achieve more inclusion, more language inclusion. And of course, it is something that is already online, already on the agenda, but still much work needs to be done. Finally, the intervention of Mark Durbin. Yes, maybe I missed the last intervention on the last questions, but actually I was trying to wrap up everything. Mark focused on digital disadvantaged groups. He corrected 15% of the world population that couldn't have access. And this access, he says, was mainly due to language-related barriers, as we mentioned during the old panel. Actually, he also pointed out that universal acceptance, as it is conceived right now, is not enough and does not address the need to provide more access and, generally speaking, availability of the internet space, the cyberspace. And so there is a need to refocus our efforts, and he would also like to suggest that this step would consider not just languages or indigenous languages, but also reshape the internationalized domain names for day-to-day activities. I hope I didn't miss too many things. There were so many subjects, expressed during the panel, but that's what. Thank you.
You did an excellent job. The only thing that was I heard that I would like probably to be reported in the report is that Mark mentioned that at a certain point in time the keyboards. And I think that this is an issue that might be forgotten, and I would like to have that in the report. Let me conclude by saying a few things.
Can I add some? The other thing important in the report is that communities need to come together also to make the IDN tables if they want to use that, using the language generation models, the rules that we have.
Yeah,
and that requires community action as well, and then that needs that needs to find support.
Yeah, I was about to say this, to mention this in the conclusion, in the sense that, but you're right, that was, I think that what one lesson learned from this session is that there are several bits and pieces that we need to put together. Is the software for translation, the keyboards, the domain names, multilingualism in general. But we also need the support. All this has to be done in support of the local communities. And so I don't see, as of today, a lot of interaction between people, for instance, who work on keyboards who work on translation, or at least I'm not aware of these efforts. I think that we should find to push towards more communication and not have all those, I leave these things as isolated pockets of things that are not related to each other. But most and foremost, this cannot happen without the involvement of the local communities. I wear in this moment my hat as an internet user. I think that this has to, as Martin has said, we need to populate this. This all doesn't make sense if we don't have content in the local languages. If this, all what we are doing in the technical world is completely useless if it's not applicable to the real life of the people. It is very unfortunate that the best practice forum on local contents has been disbanded by the IGF, or rather has been brought into a bigger basket where it's a little bit lost, and we are losing a bit in order to favor the technicalities. We are losing the fact that we are doing this for the purpose of addressing or of supporting the local populations. So I think that this is something that we have to keep in mind and have more involvement by the indigenous cultures and indigenous populations and generally local minorities in this process. Thank you all for having participated. I'm sorry about having overrun by almost 10 minutes the scheduled time. Special thanks to the support staff from Rapporteur, to the people who have coordinated the input, and that's basically it, and to all the participants and to the audience. This session is closed. Bye.